The maintenance crew at Cedar Falls Elementary School had seen a lot of strange things over the years, but nothing quite like what they discovered on the morning of October 15th, 2024. Jake Morrison, the head custodian, was performing his routine monthly inspection of the school's roof drainage system when he noticed something that made him stop dead in his tracks. Two pairs of children's shoes sat perfectly aligned on the flat section of the roof, positioned as if their owners had simply stepped out of them moments before. The shoes were small, clearly belonging to young children, and despite being exposed to what should have been 29 years of Ohio weather, they appeared to be in pristine condition. Morrison climbed down from the roof with shaking hands and immediately called Principal Margaret Chen, who arrived at the school within minutes of receiving the call. What she saw when she climbed up to examine the discovery would haunt her for the rest of her life. The shoes were instantly recognizable to anyone who had lived in Cedar Falls long enough to remember the town's most infamous unsolved case. One pair were red canvas sneakers with hand-drawn flowers on the sides, a distinctive decoration that had been mentioned in every news report about the Patterson sisters' disappearance. The other pair were small black Mary Janes with a tiny scuff mark on the left toe, a detail that had been specifically noted in the missing persons report filed 29 years earlier. These were the shoes that Emma Patterson, aged 12, and Lily Patterson, aged 9, had been wearing when they vanished while walking to school on October 15, 1995. Principal Chen stood on the rooftop of her school, staring at impossible evidence of a case that had defined and haunted her community for nearly 3 decades. The shoes were not just preserved, they were immaculate. No weather damage, no fading, no signs of aging. They looked exactly as they would have looked on the morning 2 little girls put them on for the last time. "Jake," Principal Chen said quietly, her voice trembling slightly, "call the police and make sure no one else comes up here until they arrive." Detective Sarah Martinez had been with the Cedar Falls Police Department for 15 years, but she had never worked a case that connected so directly to the town's collective trauma. When she received the call about shoes being found on the elementary school roof, her first assumption was that it was some kind of cruel prank or hoax related to the upcoming anniversary of the Patterson sisters' disappearance. But when she climbed onto that roof and saw the shoes for herself, Martinez felt the same chill that had run through Jake Morrison and Principal Chen. These weren't replicas or props. These were the actual shoes that had been described in painstaking detail in police reports, newspaper articles, and missing persons flyers that had been distributed throughout Ohio and neighboring states in 1995. Martinez had studied the Patterson case extensively during her training. It was required reading for all officers in the Cedar Falls Department, not just because it remained unsolved, but because it represented every investigator's worst nightmare: the complete disappearance of 2 children with absolutely no evidence, no witnesses, and no logical explanation. Emma and Lily Patterson had left their house at 1247 Maple Street at exactly 7:45 a.m. on October 15, 1995, just as they did every school day. They had walked the same route they always walked, a safe, well-traveled path through residential neighborhoods that should have taken them directly to Cedar Falls Elementary School in 15 minutes. They never arrived. When the school called the Patterson house at 9:30 a.m. to report the girls' absence, their mother, Janet Patterson, immediately knew something was wrong. Emma and Lily were responsible children who had never missed school without permission and had never deviated from their established routine. Janet Patterson called the police at 9:45 a.m. By 10:30 a.m., every available officer in Cedar Falls was searching the route between the Patterson house and the school. By noon, the search had expanded to include volunteer groups, neighboring police departments, and even search dogs brought in from Columbus. Over the following weeks, the investigation became one of the most intensive missing persons cases in Ohio history. FBI agents were brought in. Search teams combed through thousands of acres of surrounding countryside. Every registered sex offender within a 100-mile radius was interviewed and investigated. The girl's route to school was examined with forensic precision. Nothing was found. No witnesses came forward. No evidence was discovered. Emma and Lily Patterson had simply vanished, as completely as if they had never existed. Now, 29 years later, Detective Martinez stood on a rooftop, holding evidence that shouldn't exist, trying to process implications that defied logical explanation. She photographed the shoes from every possible angle, noting their position, their condition, and the impossibility of their presence. Then she carefully bagged them as evidence, though she wasn't sure what kind of evidence they could possibly represent. As word spread through Cedar Falls about the discovery, the entire town seemed to hold its collective breath. The Patterson case had never been officially closed, but it had become a ghost story, a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly and completely tragedy could strike even the safest communities. Now suddenly, that ghost story had materialized in the form of two pairs of perfectly preserved children's shoes sitting on a rooftop where they had no business being. Detective Martinez's first call was to retired Detective Robert Henderson, who had been the lead investigator on the original Patterson case. Henderson, now 73 years old, had never stopped thinking about Emma and Lily Patterson. The case had haunted him through his retirement, and he had continued to follow up on leads and tips long after he was no longer officially required to do so. "Detective Henderson," Martinez said when he answered his phone. "This is Sarah Martinez with Cedar Falls PD. I need to talk to you about the Patterson sisters." There was a long pause before Henderson responded. "What about them? Has something happened?" "Their shoes have been found." Another pause, even longer this time. "What do you mean their shoes have been found?" "I mean the actual shoes they were wearing the day they disappeared. Red sneakers with hand-drawn flowers and black Mary Janes with a scuff mark on the left toe. Found this morning on the roof of Cedar Falls Elementary School." Henderson was quiet for so long that Martinez began to wonder if the call had been disconnected. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "That's impossible. We searched every inch of that school and the surrounding area. We searched the roof multiple times. Those shoes weren't there. They're here now, and Detective Henderson, they look exactly like they did 29 years ago. No aging, no weather damage, nothing." Martinez could hear Henderson breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Detective Henderson arrived at the school, he was accompanied by Janet Patterson, now 67 years old, and the only surviving member of the Patterson family. Her husband had died 5 years earlier, never knowing what had happened to his daughters. Her grief had aged her beyond her years, but when she saw the shoes that Martinez showed her, something changed in her expression. "Those are Emma's," she said quietly, pointing to the red sneakers. "She drew those flowers herself the night before she disappeared. She was so proud of them." She then pointed to the black Mary Janes. "And those are Lily's. That scuff mark happened when she fell off her bike the weekend before." Janet Patterson held the shoes with trembling hands, and for the first time in 29 years, she had physical evidence that her daughters had once existed, had once walked through the world wearing these shoes, had once been real children, rather than just memories that sometimes felt like dreams. "Where did you find them?" she asked. Martinez explained about the rooftop discovery, about their impossible condition, about the fact that they had appeared exactly 29 years to the day after the girl's disappearance. Janet Patterson listened with an expression that cycled through disbelief, hope, confusion, and something that might have been relief. "What does this mean? Are my daughters, are they still alive somewhere?" It was the question that Martinez had been dreading, because she had no answer that made sense. The shoes raised more questions than they answered, and every possible explanation seemed to venture into territory that had nothing to do with conventional police work. Detective Henderson examined the shoes with the intensity of someone who had spent decades analyzing every detail of this case. "Sarah, I need to tell you something about the original investigation that never made it into the official reports." Martinez felt her pulse quicken. What kind of something? Henderson looked around to make sure they were out of earshot of other people, then spoke in a low voice. There were anomalies during the search, things that didn't make sense. Witnesses who reported seeing the girls in places where they couldn't possibly have been. Search dogs that acted strangely in certain areas. Electronic equipment that malfunctioned for no apparent reason. What kind of anomalies? Mrs. Foster, who lived 2 blocks from the school, swore she saw Emma and Lily walking past her house at 8 a.m. on the morning they disappeared. But we had already established that they never made it past the intersection of Maple and Oak, which is 4 blocks in the opposite direction. Martinez frowned. Maybe Mrs. Foster was mistaken about the time or the day. That's what we thought. But then Mr. Garcia, who worked at the gas station near the school, said he saw 2 girls matching Emma and Lily's description buying candy at 8:15 a.m. that same morning. When we showed him their photos, he positively identified them. But if they never made it to the school? Exactly, and it gets stranger. The search dogs we brought in would track the girls' scent to certain specific locations, then suddenly lose it completely. Not gradually, not because the trail went cold, but instantly, as if the girls had simply vanished into thin air at those exact spots. Martinez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. What locations? 3 different places. The corner of Maple and Oak, which is where we believe they actually disappeared. The playground behind the community center, which is half a mile from their route to school. And most strangely, the roof of Cedar Falls Elementary School. Martinez stared at Henderson. The roof? The same roof where their shoes were found today? The same roof. The dogs indicated the girls' scent there, but there was no way they could have accessed it. No ladder, no external stairs, no building tall enough nearby to jump from. We checked everything. Janet Patterson had been listening to this conversation with growing intensity. "Detective Henderson, you never told me about any of this." Henderson looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Patterson, we didn't include it in our official reports because it didn't make sense. We thought the witnesses were mistaken, that the search dogs were reacting to something else, that there had to be logical explanations." "But now," Martinez asked, "now, I'm not so sure there are logical explanations for what happened to Emma and Lily." Over the following days, news of the shoes' discovery spread beyond Cedar Falls. Local news stations picked up the story, then regional outlets, then national media. The story of 2 pairs of children's shoes appearing on a rooftop 29 years after their owner's disappearance captured public imagination in a way that few cold cases ever do. Tips began pouring into the Cedar Falls Police Department. People reported seeing Emma and Lily in various locations over the years, some recent, some decades old. Psychics offered their services. Conspiracy theorists proposed explanations involving everything from time travel to alien abduction. But Detective Martinez focused on the facts. The shoes were real. They were definitely the shoes that Emma and Lily had been wearing when they disappeared, and their condition was impossible to explain through conventional means. Martinez began re-interviewing everyone who had been involved in the original investigation, starting with the witnesses whose reports had been dismissed as unreliable or mistaken. What she discovered was a pattern of sightings and experiences that painted a picture far stranger than the official case file suggested. Mrs. Foster, now 89 years old and living in a nursing home, was still adamant about what she had seen. "Those girls walked past my house every morning for 2 years, she told Martinez. "I knew their faces, I knew their clothes, I knew their routine. On October 15, 1995, I saw them walking past my house at exactly 8 a.m. just like always." "But Mrs. Foster, The timeline doesn't work. If they left their house at 7:45 and disappeared at the corner of Maple and Oak, they couldn't have made it to your house by 8 hours. Mrs. Foster looked at Martinez with the clarity of someone who had spent 29 years being told she was wrong about something she knew she was right about. Detective, I know what I saw. Those girls walked past my house that morning. And I'll tell you something else that I never told the police at the time. What's that? They looked different. Not physically different, but sad, scared, like they were walking towards something they didn't want to face. Martinez felt another chill. Had you ever seen them look like that before? Never. Emma and Lily were happy children. They skipped to school. They laughed with each other. They waved at me when they saw me in my garden. But that morning they walked slowly, holding hands tightly, looking over their shoulders like they were being followed. Martinez made careful notes of this conversation, adding it to a growing file of information that suggested the Patterson case was far more complex than anyone had originally understood. Her next interview was with Mr. Garcia, the gas station attendant who had claimed to see the girls buying candy after they had supposedly disappeared. Garcia, now retired and living in Florida, was equally certain of what he had witnessed. I remember that morning specifically because it was unusual, he told Martinez during a phone interview. Emma and Lily had never bought candy from my store before. They were good kids who always went straight to school. But that morning, they came in around 8:15, and they seemed nervous, agitated. What did they buy? 2 chocolate bars and a bottle of water. Emma paid with exact change, which I remember because most kids that age don't carry exact change. And when I asked them if they were going to be late for school, Lily looked at Emma with this expression. I can't describe it exactly, but it was like she was asking permission to answer. What did Emma say? She said they weren't going to school that day. When I asked why, she said they had somewhere else they needed to be, something they needed to do. Martinez paused in her note-taking. Mr. Garcia, did you get the impression they were running away from home? No, not at all. They didn't have backpacks or extra clothes. They looked more like they were on some kind of mission, like they had a specific destination in mind. Did they say anything else? Just one thing. As they were leaving, Lily turned back and said, "Tell our mom we'll be okay." At the time, I thought it was just something a kid would say. But now, thinking back on it, it sounded like goodbye. Martinez ended the call feeling more confused than when she had started. Every piece of new information seemed to contradict the established timeline and the accepted facts of the case. That evening, Martinez sat in her office reviewing all the evidence, both old and new. The shoes sat in an evidence bag on her desk, looking exactly as fresh and new as they had when they were first discovered. She had sent samples to forensic laboratories for testing, but the initial results were baffling. The shoes showed no signs of aging, no accumulation of dirt or debris that would be expected from sitting on a rooftop for any length of time, and no evidence of having been exposed to weather. The leather and canvas were soft and flexible, as if they had been purchased yesterday. Even more strangely, the shoes contained no DNA evidence, no trace materials, nothing that would indicate they had ever been worn. It was as if they were perfect replicas, rather than actual shoes that had been worn by 2 children 29 years earlier. Martinez's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Janet Patterson's name. Detective Martinez, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told the police 29 years ago, but I was too scared and too confused. Martinez felt her pulse quicken. What is it, Mrs. Patterson? Emma had been having dreams. Strange dreams, starting about a month before she disappeared. She would wake up in the middle of the night, crying, saying she had dreamed about walking to school, but never arriving. What did you think the dreams meant? At the time, I thought they were just anxiety dreams. Emma was a sensitive child, and I thought maybe she was worried about a test or a presentation at school. But the dreams got more specific as time went on. Martinez grabbed a pen. Specific how? She started describing details that seemed too real to be dreams. She talked about seeing herself and Lily from above, as if she were floating over them while they walked. She described conversations they had that sounded too mature for children their ages, and she kept saying that in the dreams they never made it to school because they had to go somewhere else first. Did she ever say where else they had to go? Janet Patterson was quiet for a long moment. She said they had to go to the place where they would be safe. When I asked her what that meant, she said she didn't know, but that someone would show them when the time was right. Martinez felt a chill running down her spine. Mrs. Patterson, did you ever consider that Emma might have been having premonitions rather than dreams? Detective, I've considered a lot of possibilities over the past 29 years. All I know for certain is that my daughters disappeared, and now their shoes have appeared in a place where they have no business being. I don't care if the explanation is logical or supernatural or something in between. I just want to know what happened to my girls. After ending the call, Martinez sat in her office until late into the night, staring at the shoes and trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed to have more missing pieces than present ones. The discovery of the shoes had reopened not just a cold case, but a mystery that challenged everything she thought she knew about investigative work. The evidence suggested that Emma and Lily Patterson had somehow been in multiple places at the same time on the morning they disappeared, that they had known something was going to happen to them, and that 29 years later they were still trying to communicate with the world they had left behind. Martinez made a decision that would change the direction of the investigation completely. Instead of trying to find logical explanations for impossible evidence, she would follow the evidence wherever it led, regardless of how strange or unexplainable the destination might be, because sometimes the truth was stranger than anything logic could provide. And in the case of Emma and Lily Patterson, the truth was waiting to be discovered by someone brave enough to look beyond the boundaries of conventional investigation. The shoes were just the beginning. Detective Sarah Martinez stood at the corner of Maple and Oak at exactly 7:45 a.m., retracing the steps that Emma and Lily Patterson had taken 29 years earlier. The morning fog hung thick in the air, creating an atmosphere that was eerily similar to the conditions described in the original police reports from October 15, 1995. She had decided to conduct her own investigation of the anomalous locations that Detective Henderson had mentioned, starting with the spot where the girls had supposedly vanished. Martinez walked slowly along the route, timing her steps and noting every detail of the surroundings. At 7:52 a.m., she reached the corner where, according to all evidence, Emma and Lily had disappeared. It was an ordinary intersection in a quiet residential neighborhood with clear sightlines in all directions. There were no alleys, no hidden passages, no places where two children could simply vanish without being seen. Martinez stood at the exact spot where the search dogs had lost the girl's scent and tried to imagine what could have happened there. As she looked around, she noticed something that had apparently been overlooked during the original investigation. On the corner stood an old Victorian house that had been converted into apartments. The building had a unique architectural feature, a small octagonal tower with windows that provided a view of the entire intersection. Martinez realized that anyone in that tower would have had a perfect view of whatever had happened to Emma and Lily. She knocked on the door of the apartment building and was greeted by an elderly woman named Eleanor Blackwood, who had lived in the tower apartment for over 40 years. "Mrs. Blackwood," Martinez introduced herself, I'm investigating the Patterson sisters' disappearance. I understand you've lived here since before 1995. Eleanor's eyes lit up with recognition. Oh, you're here about Emma and Lily. I wondered when someone would finally come to ask me what I saw. Martinez felt her pulse quicken. You saw something the morning they disappeared? I saw everything, Eleanor replied, inviting Martinez into her apartment. But when I called the police that day, they said my statement didn't match the timeline and that I must have been mistaken about what day it happened. Eleanor led Martinez to the tower room, which commanded a panoramic view of the intersection below. I have breakfast here every morning at the same time, 7:50 a.m. I watch the neighborhood children walk to school. It's become a pleasant routine over the years. What did you see on October 15th, 1995? Eleanor sat down in a chair, positioned directly facing the intersection. I saw Emma and Lily walking normally until they reached the corner. Then something extraordinary happened. Martinez pulled out her notebook. What kind of something? They stopped walking and looked around as if they were listening to something. Then they both looked up directly at my window. They waved at me, which was unusual because they had never acknowledged me before. What happened next? Eleanor's expression became thoughtful, as if she were trying to find words for something difficult to describe. They didn't disappear suddenly, Detective. They faded, like someone was slowly turning down their brightness until they became transparent. And then they were gone. Martinez stared at Eleanor. You're saying they became invisible? Not invisible exactly, more like they moved into a different layer of reality. I could still see them faintly for several minutes after they became transparent, walking in the same direction they had been walking, but they were like ghosts, not quite there. Mrs. Blackwood, why didn't you insist that the police listen to your account? Eleanor sighed. Detective, I was 58 years old in 1995. I'd lived in this neighborhood my entire adult life, raised my children here, been a reliable witness to various incidents over the decades. But when I told the police that I had watched two little girls fade away like mirages, they looked at me like I was a confused old woman. Martinez made careful notes while Eleanor continued her account. There's something else. After Emma and Lily faded away, I continued to watch the intersection. About 10 minutes later, they reappeared, but only for a few seconds. They looked different, older somehow, even though only minutes had passed. They waved at me again, and then they faded away permanently. Older how? Taller, more mature in the way they carried themselves, and their expressions were different. When they first disappeared, they looked like children on their way to school. When they reappeared, they looked like they had experienced something profound, something that had changed them. Martinez left Eleanor's apartment with more questions than answers, but she was beginning to sense a pattern in the impossible testimonies surrounding the Patterson case. She decided to visit the second anomalous location, the playground behind the community center. The Cedar Falls Community Center was a brick building from the 1960s with a small playground behind it that was rarely used. When Martinez arrived, she found the area empty except for an old man sitting on a bench reading a newspaper. "Excuse me," Martinez approached him. "I'm Detective Martinez with the Cedar Falls Police. Are you here often?" The man looked up and smiled. "Every day for the past 15 years. I'm Thomas Wright. I live in the senior housing complex next door, and this is where I come to think. Mr. Wright, were you living here in 1995? I was indeed. Moved here in 1992 when my wife passed away." Martinez felt another surge of hope. "Do you remember anything unusual happening in this area on October 15th, 1995? Thomas's expression immediately became serious. "You're asking about the day the Patterson girls disappeared?" "Yes. Did you see anything?" Thomas set down his newspaper and gestured for Martinez to sit beside him on the bench. "Detective, I've been waiting 29 years for someone to ask me that question." What did you see? I was sitting right here, on this same bench, at about 8:30 in the morning. I was feeling particularly melancholy that day. It was the anniversary of my wife's death, when I heard children's voices coming from the playground. Martinez looked around the empty playground. Was that unusual? Very unusual. The playground isn't visible from the street, so children don't typically find it unless they're specifically looking for it. And it was a school day, so any children should have been in class by that time. What did you see when you looked toward the playground? Thomas pointed to the swing set. Two little girls, maybe 9 and 12 years old, swinging together and having what sounded like a very serious conversation. They weren't playing the way children usually play. They were talking like adults, discussing important matters. Could you hear what they were saying? Bits and pieces. The younger girl kept asking, "Are you sure we have to do this?" And the older girl kept reassuring her, saying, "It's the only way to keep everyone safe." Martinez felt chills running down her arms. What happened next? They swung for maybe 10 minutes, having this intense conversation, and then they stopped and looked directly at me. The older girl, who I now know was Emma, waved and called out, "Don't worry, Mr. Wright. We'll be okay, and so will you." She knew your name? Apparently so, though I had never spoken to either of those children before in my life. Then what happened? Thomas was quiet for a moment, collecting his thoughts. They got off the swings and walked toward the woods behind the playground. But, Detective, here's the strange part. There are no woods behind this playground. Martinez turned to look behind the playground and saw that Thomas was right. Behind the playground was nothing but an open field leading to a parking lot. But that morning, Thomas continued, there was a path leading into deep woods. The girls walked down that path holding hands, and I watched until they disappeared among the trees. When I blinked and looked again, the woods were gone, just the empty field that's there now. Mr. Wright, did you report this to the police? I tried to. I called the police station that afternoon when I heard about the girls being missing, but when the officer came to interview me, I realized how crazy my story sounded. Woods that appeared and disappeared, children who knew my name even though I'd never met them. I decided to keep quiet rather than be dismissed as a senile old man. Martinez spent the rest of the morning interviewing other long-term residents of the area around the community center. What she discovered was that several people had noticed unusual phenomena in the vicinity on October 15th, 1995, but none had reported it because they couldn't explain what they had witnessed. Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived across the street from the community center, reported that her dogs had behaved strangely that morning, barking and whining at something they could see that she couldn't. Mr. Kim, who worked at a nearby gas station, said his radio had picked up what sounded like children's voices speaking in some kind of code. Ms. Johnson, a jogger who ran through the area every morning, reported seeing what looked like heat mirages in the shape of children, even though the temperature was only 45 degrees. By afternoon, Martinez had compiled a list of 17 people who had experienced something unusual in the vicinity of the community center on the morning of October 15th, 1995. None had reported their experiences because they couldn't explain them rationally. Martinez's final stop was the roof of Cedar Falls Elementary School, where the shoes had been discovered. She brought with her a sensitive metal detector and electromagnetic field reader, tools that hadn't been available to investigators in 1995. On the roof, both instruments registered anomalous readings in the exact spot where the shoes had been found. The metal detector picked up traces of materials that shouldn't exist in nature, and the electromagnetic field reader showed energy signatures that fluctuated in patterns that resembled communication signals. Martinez was documenting these readings when her phone rang. The caller was Dr. Rebecca Chen, a physicist from Ohio State University who had read about the Patterson case in the news and had a theory she wanted to discuss. Detective Martinez, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I've been following the Patterson case and I think I might have an explanation for what happened to those girls. I'm open to any theories at this point, Dr. Chen. Have you ever heard of temporal displacement phenomena? Martinez paused in her note-taking. I can't say that I have. It's a theoretical concept in quantum physics. The idea is that under certain specific conditions, people or objects can slip out of linear time and exist in what we call temporal loops or pocket dimensions. That sounds like science fiction. I understand your skepticism, but there have been documented cases of unexplained disappearances that share characteristics with what happened to Emma and Lily. People vanishing completely, multiple witnesses seeing them in impossible locations, and physical evidence appearing years later in pristine condition. Martinez felt her interest growing. What would cause this kind of temporal displacement? Usually, it's associated with locations that have experienced significant emotional trauma or that sit on geological anomalies. The displaced individuals often have some kind of psychic sensitivity that makes them susceptible to the phenomenon. Dr. Chen, can I ask you to come to Cedar Falls? I'd like you to examine the locations where the anomalies occurred. I'll be there tomorrow morning. That evening, Martinez met with Detective Henderson and Janet Patterson to discuss her findings. Henderson listened to her reports with growing amazement. Sarah, you've documented more evidence in 2 days than we collected in months of investigation. But I have to ask, do you really believe that Emma and Lily somehow slipped out of normal time? Martinez looked at the evidence she had compiled. Detective Henderson, a week ago I would have said that was impossible. But I've now spoken to 19 witnesses who saw the girls in locations where they couldn't have been. At times that don't match the timeline, doing things that suggest they knew something was going to happen to them. Janet Patterson had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. Detective Martinez, there's something else I need to tell you, something I found in Emma's room after she disappeared. She pulled out a small diary that she had never shown to the police. I found this hidden under her mattress. I was afraid to show it to anyone because, well, you'll understand when you read it. Martinez opened the diary to the final entry, dated October 14th, 1995, the day before the girls disappeared. Tomorrow is the day. Lily and I have been preparing for weeks, even though we don't understand everything that's happening to us. The dreams are getting stronger, and now we can see the path even when we're awake. The lady in white says we have to go with her to keep everyone safe, but she promises we'll be able to come back and see Mom when the time is right. I'm scared, but I know this is something we have to do. I hope Mom understands that we're not running away. We're just going somewhere we need to be for a while. I love her so much, and I hope she knows that everything we're doing is because we love her. Martinez stared at the diary entry, feeling pieces of an impossible puzzle clicking into place. Mrs. Patterson, who is the lady in white that Emma mentions? I don't know. Emma never mentioned anyone like that to me. Detective Henderson leaned forward. Sarah, I think it's time to tell you about the other part of the investigation that never made it into the official reports. What other part? We received reports of a woman in white being seen around town in the weeks leading up to the girls' disappearance, always near locations where children gathered, parks, schools, playgrounds. Witnesses described her as tall, with long white hair, wearing an old-fashioned white dress. Why wasn't this investigated? We tried to investigate, but we could never find anyone who matched the description. And the sightings always occurred at times when children were present, but the woman was never seen interacting with any children directly. Martinez felt a chill of recognition. Detective Henderson, do you still have the witness descriptions of this woman? I have my old notes at home. I need to see them, because I think we're about to discover that Emma and Lily Patterson weren't victims of a crime. They were participants in something that we don't understand yet. The next morning, Dr. Rebecca Chen arrived in Cedar Falls with equipment designed to detect temporal anomalies. When she took readings at the 3 locations where the girls had been sighted, her instruments registered energy signatures that she had never seen before. Detective Martinez, these readings suggest that this entire area experienced some kind of temporal event on October 15, 1995. It's as if a doorway opened between our normal timeline and somewhere else. Is that scientifically possible? According to our current understanding of physics, no, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Science is constantly discovering phenomena that were previously thought to be impossible. Dr. Chen's most significant discovery came when she examined the roof of the elementary school. The energy readings here are off the charts. Whatever happened to place those shoes on this roof involved massive amounts of temporal energy. What does that mean? It means that Emma and Lily Patterson didn't just disappear 29 years ago. They've been existing in some kind of temporal loop, and they recently found a way to send a message back to our timeline. Martinez stared at the physicist. You're saying the shoes are a message? I'm saying the shoes are proof that the girls are still alive, but not in the way we usually understand being alive. They exist in a space outside normal time, and they wanted us to know that they're okay. That afternoon, Martinez received a call that would change everything she thought she knew about the Patterson case. The caller was a woman named Sarah Williams, who had driven from Michigan after seeing the news reports about the discovered shoes. Detective Martinez, I think I'm the lady in white that Emma mentioned in her diary. Martinez felt her world shift. Can you come to the police station immediately? When Sarah Williams arrived, Martinez immediately understood why witnesses had described her as mysterious and otherworldly. She was tall and elegant, with prematurely white hair and an ageless quality that made it difficult to determine whether she was 40 or 60 years old. Ms. Williams, please explain your connection to Emma and Lily Patterson. Sarah sat down and took a deep breath. Detective, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need you to listen with an open mind. I'm listening. I am what you might call a temporal guardian. I help children who are born with certain psychic abilities navigate situations where those abilities put them in danger. Martinez felt like she was stepping through the looking glass. What kind of danger? Emma and Lily Patterson were born with the ability to see across time. They could perceive events that hadn't happened yet and communicate with people in different temporal periods. In most cases, children with these abilities live normal lives and gradually lose them as they grow older. But not in Emma and Lily's case. No, their abilities were unusually strong, and they had begun to attract the attention of entities that exist in the spaces between normal time. These entities wanted to use the girls' abilities for purposes that would have harmed not just Emma and Lily, but potentially everyone they cared about. Martinez struggled to process this information. So you helped them disappear? I helped them transition to a safe temporal space where they could develop their abilities without being exploited. It was supposed to be temporary, maybe a few months or a year at most, but something went wrong with the transition. What went wrong? Sarah Williams looked genuinely distressed. They became trapped in a temporal loop. For 29 years, they've been experiencing the same day over and over, trying to find a way back to your timeline. And the shoes. The shoes are their breakthrough. They finally found a way to send physical evidence back to your reality. It's their way of telling us that they're ready to come home. Martinez stared at Sarah Williams, trying to determine whether she was listening to the truth or the delusions of someone who had read too much about the Patterson case. "Ms. Williams, can you prove any of what you're telling me?" Sarah smiled sadly. "Detective, tomorrow is October 16th, 2024. If Emma and Lily are truly ready to return, they will appear at the corner of Maple and Oak at exactly 7:45 a.m., 29 years, and one day after they originally disappeared. And if they don't appear, then I'm either lying or mistaken, and you can dismiss everything I've told you." Martinez looked at this strange woman who claimed to be a temporal guardian, at the impossible evidence she had collected, at the diary entry that suggested Emma had known something extraordinary was going to happen to her. "Ms. Williams, I'll be at that corner tomorrow morning, and I hope for everyone's sake that you're telling the truth. Because after 2 days of investigating impossible evidence and interviewing witnesses to inexplicable events, Martinez was ready to believe that the Patterson sisters' story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. October 16th, 2024, 7:30 a.m. Detective Sarah Martinez stood at the corner of Maple and Oak, feeling a mixture of anticipation and skepticism that she had never experienced in 15 years of police work. The morning fog was thick, creating an atmosphere that seemed deliberately designed to mirror the conditions of 29 years earlier. She wasn't alone. Word had somehow spread through Cedar Falls about the possibility of Emma and Lily Patterson's return, and despite Martinez's attempts to keep the information confidential, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. Janet Patterson sat in her car across the street, too nervous to stand, but unable to stay away. Detective Henderson stood nearby, his weathered face showing the strain of decades of wondering about the case that had defined his career. Dr. Rebecca Chen was present with her temporal detection equipment, taking constant readings and monitoring for any energy signatures that might indicate interdimensional activity. Sarah Williams, the woman who claimed to be a temporal guardian, stood slightly apart from the group, her attention focused on the empty intersection with an intensity that suggested she was seeing something the others could not. "Any readings yet, Dr. Chen?" Martinez asked, checking her watch. 7:42 a.m. "The energy levels are fluctuating, but nothing definitive yet. If something is going to happen, it should begin within the next few minutes." Eleanor Blackwood was watching from her tower window, just as she had 29 years earlier. Thomas Wright had positioned himself on a bench where he could see the intersection clearly. Even Mrs. Rodriguez was in her front yard with her dogs, who had been agitated since dawn. 7:43 a.m. Martinez felt her heart rate increasing. Part of her hoped that Sarah Williams was telling the truth, that Emma and Lily would somehow return to their mother and finally solve the mystery that had haunted Cedar Falls for decades. But another part of her dreaded the possibility that nothing would happen, that the hope she had inadvertently given to Janet Patterson would prove to be false. 7:44 a.m. Dr. Chen's equipment began registering stronger energy signatures. "Detective, something's starting to happen. The temporal readings are spiking." Martinez looked around the intersection, but everything appeared normal. Empty street, quiet neighborhood, thick fog that seemed to be getting thicker rather than dissipating with the sunrise. 7:45 a.m. At first, nothing happened. Then Eleanor Blackwood's voice called out from her tower window, "I can see them! They're coming!" Martinez strained her eyes, looking in every direction, but she couldn't see anything except fog and empty pavement. "Where? I don't see anything." "There!" Sarah Williams pointed to the center of the intersection. "They're materializing." Dr. Chen's equipment was now emitting a steady beeping sound. Massive temporal displacement occurring. Energy levels unlike anything I've ever recorded. And then Martinez saw them. Two figures began to fade into view in the exact center of the intersection, as if they were being slowly adjusted from transparent to solid. At first, they were like mirages, barely visible in the morning fog. But gradually they became clearer, more substantial, more real. Emma and Lily Patterson. But they weren't the children who had disappeared 29 years earlier. They appeared to be in their late 20s and early 30s, the ages they would have been if they had grown up normally in linear time. Emma was tall and graceful, with long dark hair and eyes that held depths of experience far beyond what any normal 30-year-old would possess. Lily was shorter but equally poised, with a gentle expression that somehow conveyed both innocence and profound wisdom. They stood holding hands in the intersection, looking around at the assembled crowd with expressions of relief and homecoming that brought tears to Martinez's eyes. Janet Patterson had gotten out of her car and was walking slowly toward the intersection, her hands covering her mouth in shock and disbelief. "Emma? Lily? Is it really you?" Emma smiled, and it was the same smile that Janet had remembered every day for 29 years. "Hi, Mom. We're sorry we're late." The reunion that followed was unlike anything Martinez had ever witnessed. Janet Patterson embraced daughters who were now older than she had been when they disappeared, crying with a combination of joy, confusion, and overwhelming relief. Emma and Lily held their mother gently, as if they understood that this moment needed to be savored and handled with infinite care. "I don't understand," Janet whispered. "How is this possible? Where have you been? Why do you look so old?" Lily finished with a gentle laugh. "Mom, we have so much to tell you." Detective Henderson approached the group slowly, his face showing the emotions of a man who had finally received the answer to a question that had tormented him for decades. "Emma, Lily, I'm Detective Henderson. I've been looking for you for 29 years. Emma turned to him with a smile of recognition. "We know, Detective Henderson. We've been watching. We've seen how hard you've worked to try to find us. Thank you for never giving up." Martinez stepped forward, her mind reeling with questions. "Emma, Lily, can you explain what happened to you? Where have you been for the past 29 years? Emma and Lily exchanged a glance that communicated volumes. "Detective Martinez, we've been living in a place that exists outside normal time, a place where we needed to be to protect ourselves and everyone we loved." Sarah Williams approached the group, and both Emma and Lily immediately moved toward her with expressions of deep gratitude and affection. "Sarah," Emma said, embracing the woman who had guided them into temporal displacement, "thank you for helping us find our way home." "I'm sorry it took so long," Sarah replied. "The temporal loops were more complex than I anticipated." Dr. Chen was frantically documenting the energy readings from her equipment. "The temporal distortion field is stabilizing. Whatever process brought them back is completing itself." Martinez looked around at the crowd that had gathered to witness this impossible reunion. "Emma, Lily, I need to understand what happened. For the official record, for your mother's peace of mind, for everyone who has wondered about your disappearance for nearly 3 decades. Emma nodded. "We'll tell you everything, but perhaps we should go somewhere more private." An hour later, the core group had assembled in the conference room at the Cedar Falls police station. Emma and Lily sat with their mother, holding her hands and occasionally exchanging glances that suggested they were communicating on levels beyond normal speech. Sarah Williams sat nearby, ready to provide context for explanations that would challenge everyone's understanding of reality. "Detective Martinez," Emma began, "when Lily and I were children, we began having experiences that we didn't understand. We could see things that hadn't happened yet, communicate with people in different time periods, and sometimes even visit places that existed in other temporal dimensions." Lily continued, "At first, our abilities were weak and sporadic, but as we got older, they became stronger and more difficult to control. We started attracting attention from entities that wanted to use our abilities for harmful purposes. Martinez took careful notes. What kind of entities? Sarah Williams answered, There are beings that exist in the spaces between normal time and space. Most are benign, but some feed on temporal energy and seek to manipulate individuals with psychic abilities. Emma and Lily's powers were strong enough to be noticed by some very dangerous entities. Emma nodded. About a month before we disappeared, we started having dreams about something terrible happening to our family, to our entire town, if we didn't leave. The entities that had found us were planning to use our abilities to create temporal rifts that would have devastating consequences. So you chose to disappear, Detective Henderson asked. We chose to accept Sarah's help in moving to a safe temporal space, Lily explained. We thought it would be temporary, just long enough for the entities to lose interest and move on. Janet Patterson squeezed her daughter's hands. But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you explain what was happening? Emma's eyes filled with tears. Mom, we were 12 and 9 years old. How could we have explained something that we barely understood ourselves? And we thought we would be back in a few months at most. What went wrong? Martinez asked. Sarah Williams looked genuinely distressed. The temporal displacement was more complex than I had anticipated. Instead of moving Emma and Lily to a stable alternate timeline, they became trapped in a temporal loop centered on the day they disappeared. A temporal loop? Dr. Chen leaned forward with scientific interest. Lily explained, We've been living October 15th, 1995, over and over again for 29 years. Same day, same events, same conversations, but with our consciousness intact and accumulating memories. Emma added, But it wasn't exactly the same each time. We experienced variations of that day, different possible outcomes, different versions of events. Sometimes we made it to school, sometimes we went to different places, sometimes we encountered the entities that were hunting us. We learned to use the loop to our advantage, Lily continued. We studied the entities, learned their weaknesses, and eventually figured out how to defeat them permanently. Martinez tried to process this information. So you spent 29 years fighting interdimensional entities while trapped in a single day? In simplified terms, yes, Emma confirmed, but we also learned about our abilities, about the nature of time itself, about responsibilities that come with psychic powers. Detective Henderson asked the question everyone was thinking. Why could you return now? What changed? Sarah Williams smiled for the first time since the reunion began. They completed their mission. The entities that threatened them and everyone they loved have been eliminated. Emma and Lily are now powerful enough to protect themselves and others, and they're ready to rejoin linear time. But we didn't want to return as children, Lily explained. We've experienced 29 years of growth and learning, even if it all happened within a single, repeated day. We returned at the ages we would have been if we had lived normally. Janet Patterson had been listening to this explanation with a mixture of wonder and maternal concern. My daughters, what you've been through, the sacrifice you made. Mom, Emma said gently, we need you to understand that we don't regret what happened. Yes, we missed 29 years of linear time with you, but we spent those years protecting you and everyone else we loved. We watched over you, even when you couldn't see us. You watched over me, Lily smiled. Why do you think you had so many close calls over the years that turned out okay? The car accident that should have been serious but resulted in only minor injuries, the health scare that turned out to be benign, the financial problems that were resolved by unexpected opportunities. We couldn't interfere directly, Emma added, but we could influence probability, nudge events in directions that would keep you safe and happy. Martinez was taking extensive notes, though she wasn't sure how any of this would fit into an official police report. Emma, Lily, what happens now? Are you planning to stay in Cedar Falls? How do you integrate into a world that has moved forward 29 years without you? Emma and Lily exchanged another of their meaningful glances. Detective Martinez, we've had 29 years to plan for this moment. We understand that we can't simply return to our old lives. Too much has changed, and we've changed too much as well. Sarah Williams provided additional context. Emma and Lily have decided to work with me and others like me to help children who are born with psychic abilities. They want to ensure that no other families have to go through what the Pattersons have experienced. But we'll be based here in Cedar Falls, Lily added quickly, seeing the concern in her mother's eyes. We want to rebuild our relationship with you, Mom. We want to be part of your life again. We know it won't be easy, Emma continued. You've grieved for us for 29 years. You've built a life around our absence. We don't expect to simply slot back into roles that no longer exist. Janet Patterson wiped tears from her eyes. My daughters, you're worried about my adjustment? You've sacrificed your childhoods, your adolescence, your entire young adult lives to protect people you loved. The least I can do is figure out how to be mother to two extraordinary women instead of two lost little girls. Dr. Chen had been monitoring her equipment throughout the conversation. The temporal readings have completely stabilized. Whatever process brought Emma and Lily back to our timeline appears to be permanent. Martinez closed her notebook. I'm going to have to write a report about this case, but I'm not sure anyone will believe it. Detective Henderson laughed. Sarah, I've been thinking about this case for 29 years, and I'm not sure I believe it myself. Detective Henderson, Emma said, we know you blamed yourself for not being able to find us. We need you to understand that you did everything right. There was no way conventional investigation could have solved our case because our situation wasn't conventional. You couldn't have found us because we weren't missing in the way missing is usually understood, Lily added. We were displaced, and displacement requires different solutions than disappearance. Over the following weeks, Cedar Falls slowly adjusted to the return of Emma and Lily Patterson. The story attracted national media attention, though the family carefully controlled what information was released to the public. Most news reports focused on the joyful reunion and the mystery of where the sisters had been, without delving into the more extraordinary aspects of their experience. Emma and Lily moved into a house near their mother, close enough to rebuild their relationship, but independent enough to establish their adult lives. They enrolled in online university programs to earn formal educations that would complement the knowledge they had gained during their temporal displacement. True to their word, they began working with Sarah Williams to establish a network for helping children with psychic abilities and their families. The Cedar Falls Institute for Temporal Studies became a discreet resource for families dealing with supernatural phenomena, offering both practical support and scientific research into unexplained temporal events. Detective Martinez was promoted to head of a new department focused on investigating cases with supernatural or unexplained elements. Her success with the Patterson case had caught the attention of federal agencies that were quietly researching similar phenomena. Detective Henderson finally retired. His last case closed after 29 years. At his retirement party, Emma and Lily presented him with a plaque that read, "To Detective Robert Henderson, who never stopped believing that lost children can find their way home." Eleanor Blackwood continued her morning routine in the Tower apartment, but now she occasionally saw Emma and Lily walking past her intersection, no longer fading away but moving confidently through their reclaimed world. Thomas Wright found that his conversations with Emma and Lily in the playground behind the community center were among the most meaningful of his senior years. The girls who had once told him not to worry had become women who brought wisdom and comfort to an elderly man who had spent years wondering if what he had witnessed was real. Janet Patterson struggled initially with the challenge of relating to daughters who were now older than she had been when they disappeared. But gradually, she discovered that the love between mother and children transcends linear time, and that the joy of reunion far outweighed the confusion of changed circumstances. 6 months after their return, Emma and Lily organized a community gathering to thank everyone who had helped with their case and to provide closure for a town that had been haunted by their disappearance for decades. "People of Cedar Falls," Emma addressed the gathering, "Lily and I want you to know that during our 29 years away, this community was always our anchor. The love and concern you showed our mother, the dedication you gave to searching for us, the way you never forgot us, all of that helped us find our way home." Lily continued, "We know our story challenges everything most people believe about reality. We know it's difficult to understand how 2 children could disappear for 29 years and return as adults. But we hope our experience can serve as a reminder that love transcends time, that family bonds can't be broken by any distance or displacement, and that sometimes the most impossible things are the most true." Detective Martinez stood in the crowd, reflecting on how the Patterson case had changed not just her understanding of police work, but her understanding of reality itself. She had learned that some mysteries couldn't be solved through conventional investigation, that some truths required openness to possibilities beyond normal experience. As the gathering concluded and people began to disperse, Martinez noticed that the shoes that had started this entire incredible journey, were displayed in a place of honor at the Cedar Falls Community Center. A plaque beneath them read, "In memory of Emma and Lily Patterson's temporal displacement, 1995-2024. A reminder that sometimes being lost is the first step toward finding something greater than what was left behind." Emma and Lily approached Martinez as she was reading the plaque. "Detective Martinez," Emma said, "we want to thank you for believing in impossible evidence and following it wherever it led. We know it couldn't have been easy," Lily added, "to investigate a case that challenged everything you thought you knew about police work." Martinez smiled. "You know, 6 months ago, I would have said that police work was about finding logical explanations for criminal behavior. Now I know it's about finding truth, regardless of whether that truth fits into conventional logic." "What's your next case?" Emma asked. "We just received reports about a family in Nebraska whose teenage son disappeared while mowing the lawn, but neighbors keep reporting seeing him working in their garden at night. His parents say he comes home for dinner every evening, but he has no memory of the disappearances." Emma and Lily exchanged knowing glances. "Sounds like temporal displacement with possible memory fragmentation," Lily observed. "Would you like some consultation?" Emma offered. Martinez laughed. "I was hoping you'd ask." D. As the sun set over Cedar Falls on that evening in April 2025, the town that had been defined by an unsolved mystery for 29 years had become a place known for impossible reunions and second chances. Emma and Lily Patterson had returned not just to their family, but to a community that had never stopped hoping for their safe return. The case that had begun with 2 pairs of children's shoes appearing on a rooftop had concluded with the understanding that love, determination, and openness to extraordinary possibilities could overcome even the barriers of time itself. And in the house where Janet Patterson now lived with her adult daughters, who had somehow returned from a 29-year journey through temporal displacement, family dinners were filled with stories that spanned decades of separation and reunion, loss and recovery, impossible circumstances, and the unbreakable bonds that make all impossibilities possible. The lost sisters had found their way home, not as the children who had disappeared, but as the women they had become, through experiences that transcended normal understanding of time, space, and reality. And their stories served as a reminder that sometimes the most profound truths can only be discovered by those brave enough to believe in the impossible.